You have a friend who's a genius with money on paper, at least on paper. A spreadsheet for everything. Formulas built for every possible scenario he can imagine happening. And $40,000 just sitting there, quietly earning almost nothing at all. Meet Marcus, mechanical engineer. Top 2% on his company's own aptitude test. He has never once bought a single share of stock in his entire life. Ask him why not, and he'll give you 20 flawless minutes of solid reasoning. Here's the uncomfortable part. This isn't really about Marcus specifically at all. It's about why being genuinely logical can quietly keep smart, capable people poor. In 2014, researchers Daniel Fernandez, John Lynch, and Richard Nettemeyer reviewed over 200 separate studies on financial behavior and found something strange. Knowing more about money barely changes what people actually do with their own money over an entire lifetime, decision by decision. Smart people don't invest less because they understand less about markets. They invest less because their brains are wired to punish a potential loss almost twice as hard as they reward an equal potential gain every single time, without exception, according to the underlying research. In 1979, psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky ran a series of experiments proving humans feel the sting of losing roughly 2.25 times more intensely than they feel winning that exact same amount of money in return. They named this loss aversion. It isn't a flaw reserved for careless or uninformed people. It's a factory setting built into every single human nervous system on the planet, including the one currently running inside your own skull right now, reading this. There's a related paradox worth noting here. Economists Brad Barber and Terence O'Dean, in a widely cited 2001 study, found the most confident investors traded the most often and aim measurably worse returns than everyone else studied in that same dataset. Confidence in your own logic doesn't protect you from bias at all. Sometimes it just makes the bias feel more justified, because you trust your own careful reasoning too much to ever really pause and seriously question it before acting on it at all. Here's the twist that makes this even worse for analytical minds specifically. The sharper your reasoning becomes, the more elaborate ways you find to simulate the loss long before it has actually even happened to you at all. A logical brain doesn't feel one vague fear about money. It calculates 40 separate futures where the money disappears entirely, then treats every single one like a real, live event unfolding right now, today, in this exact room. Marcus doesn't picture invest $400 a month. He pictures a market crash, a sudden layoff, an emergency room bill, and a divorce, all stacked neatly onto the exact same Tuesday afternoon somehow, all at once, entirely together. Psychologists call this catastrophizing through simulation. The more intelligent and detail-oriented you naturally are, the more vivid and convincing your imagined financial disasters become inside your own head, on constant repeat, night after night, without fail, every single time. Meanwhile, his co-worker Priya, who says she doesn't really think about money much, quietly built a retirement account worth 6 figures by automating one single decision years ago and never once revisiting that original decision since making it. She didn't outthink the market or time it perfectly, and she never once claimed to. She simply stopped recalculating the risk every week, which turned out to be the entire advantage the whole time, without her even fully realizing it. This is where two ideas get confused constantly: risk tolerance and risk capacity. Risk tolerance is how risk feels to you emotionally in the moment. Risk capacity is what your actual finances can genuinely, realistically survive over the long run. A person can have enormous risk capacity, years of income runway, zero debt, and a stable job, and still feel completely, physically unable to invest a single extra dollar of it into anything at all, ever, no matter what. Logical people often trust the feeling over the data here, mistaking anxiety for real evidence of danger, when that anxiety is really just loss aversion quietly firing on a loop in the background, unnoticed and unquestioned, day after day. There's a second trap working against precise minds: choice overload. In a landmark 2000 study, psychologists Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper showed that more available options often produce less action overall, not more decisive, confident action from people. Give someone 6 clear investment choices and most people act within days, without much hesitation at all. Give them 60 index funds and robo-advisors to compare line by line, and most people freeze completely, indefinitely, without ever actually deciding. The analytical brain treats every extra option as more homework to complete before the correct answer can finally be found. And homework with no real deadline quietly gets pushed to tomorrow, forever, with no actual plan in sight. Marcus currently has 41 browser tabs open comparing expense ratios down to the 100th%, carefully, again and again. He's technically been about to decide for roughly 3 years now, and the number keeps climbing steadily. There's a third pattern working against him, the disposition effect, first named by economists Urs Schefrin and May Statman back in 1985, based on real brokerage trading account data they carefully analyzed at the time, sentence by sentence. It describes investors who sell their winning assets far too early, fearing the gain will vanish overnight, while holding on to their losing assets far too long, hoping desperately they'll eventually bounce back somehow, someday, against all the odds. Notice both moves come from the exact same underlying instinct. Avoid feeling the loss right now, even when waiting clearly costs more real money later on, month after month, quietly compounding against you, unnoticed and left completely unaddressed. Logical people often assume they're the exception to this bias, simply because they can name the bias out loud in casual conversation. But naming a bias doesn't automatically disable it inside your own actual decisions, ever, in practice. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio studied patients with damaged emotional processing centers in the brain, documented extensively in his own research on decision-making. These patients could reason flawlessly, yet became paralyzed making even simple, low-stakes choices constantly, without warning. Without any emotional input at all, choosing between two nearly identical options could take these patients literal hours to complete. Pure logic, stripped of gut feeling entirely, doesn't produce faster decisions. It often produces no decision whatsoever. In the end, none at all. So the actual goal was never removing emotion from money decisions completely, and it never really should be, either. The real goal is noticing the exact moment emotion has quietly taken over the steering wheel from you, unannounced. There's also a fourth factor at play here, status quo bias, documented in a 1988 study by economists William Samuelson and Richard Zeckhauser, later expanded on extensively by economist Richard Thaler in his own influential work. Their research found that people overwhelmingly prefer whatever their current situation already is, even a clearly worse one, simply because staying put requires zero visible effort or any real action to maintain day after day, indefinitely, without ever changing. Doing nothing with your money feels completely safe. It genuinely isn't, though. Inflation guarantees a checking account balance quietly loses real purchasing power every single year, predictably and mathematically, whether you ever notice it happening or not. Here's what genuinely shifts behavior instead, separating the one big decision from the daily emotional recheck entirely and completely. Automate the contribution a single time, and remove yourself entirely from the weekly emotional vote on it completely. Behavioral economists call this a commitment device, essentially a way of locking in your smarter, calmer self-decision before your anxious, tired, 3 a.m. self ever gets a single vote on the matter at all. Ever. No exceptions. Economists Richard Thaler and Shlomo Benartzi tested exactly this idea in a 1990s program called Save More Tomorrow, which tied future pay raises directly to automatic increases in retirement contributions, automatically and consistently, each and every single year. Participants in that program saved nearly 4 times more over several years, not because they suddenly became smart about money, but because the actual decision only ever had to be consciously made a single time, upfront, once and for all. A second practical shift worth trying: measure risk in decades, not in this week's headlines. A logical brain heavily overweights recent, vivid news, a well-documented pattern called the availability heuristic, named and studied extensively in behavioral research. A single market drop feels like urgent, important new data in the exact moment it happens. Historically, across nearly a century of market history, it's mostly short-term noise sitting on top of a much longer upward trend. Marcus finally opened one account last spring, not because he found the objectively perfect fund after years of searching through endless tabs and reviews. He simply stopped waiting for the fear itself to fully disappear first, entirely. Wealth rarely rewards the person with the single most accurate spreadsheet of every possible disaster imaginable. It quietly rewards the person calm enough to keep one simple decision running long after the fear should have reasonably stopped them entirely.